Hello there, welcome to Chapter 5 of the Jedi Temple Guard series. We'll be taking a look at the lightsaber forms that were most likely used by the Jedi Temple Guards in this chapter. In the previous chapter, we reviewed the various weapons used by the Jedi Temple Guards. Now, let's discuss how those weapons would have been used in combat. Each of the lightsabers we looked over is unique in its construction and would require a different fighting style. In order to better understand exactly how these weapons would be used, we must go into the various lightsaber forms seen in Star Wars. In the current canon, the 7 lightsaber forms are referred to as Form 1, Form 3, Form 6, etc. I would like to first acknowledge their formal names as seen in the Legends continuity. The new canon of Star Wars has yet to portray how each form differs from one another. Luckily, Legends content went far more in depth than the current canon with how these lightsaber forms worked. So I will be using Legends information to describe the 7 lightsaber forms and their variants. So brace yourselves in for a crash course on lightsaber forms. The first form of lightsaber combat, Siow, was the first form all Jedi are taught at an early age. It encompasses the pure basics of swordplay. Its simplicity is its strength, in that it does not favor offense over defense and vice versa. It is versatile enough that it can be used with any form of lightsaber. Siow utilizes wide, powerful arcs and swings in circular motions. It is useful for fighting and defending against multiple opponents. While often overlooked in favor of other forms, it can be an extremely powerful form in the right hands. Jedi Master Kit Fisto was a master of Siow and used it to fight General Grievous and nearly defeated him, a feat very few Jedi could pull off. While this form can be used by any Jedi of any physique, it works best if the practitioner is physically strong. If you lack a strong build, then perhaps a weapon that can provide better leverage, such as a long hilt lightsaber or a lightsaber pike, would be a better fit. The second form of lightsaber combat was known as Makashi. This form was developed specifically to combat other lightsabers. When using Form 2, the user would hold their blade in a horizontal position parallel to the ground, rather than holding it vertically as with most other forms. This allows the user to create more distance between themselves and their opponent. The position of the lightsaber affects the way the user attacks with it. With Form 2, there are far fewer slashes and more thrusting and piercing attacks. This form values dexterity and precision, and with that precision, a Makashi user can weave through the wide arcing attacks found in Siow. As a dueling-centric form, it was common for Makashi practitioners to perform a salute with their lightsaber before fighting their opponent as a sign of respect for their opponent and the duel itself. To a Makashi user, lightsaber combat was an art. The most notable practitioner of this form is Count Dooku. Form 3, Soresu, was developed after the advent of blaster weapons. This form is a purely defensive form designed to defend the user as efficiently as possible while using as little energy required. This became a popular form for Jedi to practice, as this allowed them to focus on a rather pacifist form in which to aim not to harm anyone. Instead, they would tire out the opponent or defend themselves until the opponent has drained themselves of resources. True masters of Soresu can perform exceptional feats and can enter a form of meditation using Soresu, letting the Force guide their movements. This is seen in Revenge of the Sith as Obi-Wan Kenobi fights General Grievous, which the novelization states he was blocking 20 strikes per second with Soresu. Ataru is a very active lightsaber form in which the user favored fast strikes over powerful ones. A practitioner of Ataru would use the Force to enhance their innate acrobatic abilities, allowing them to jump, tuck, and roll through and around their opponent to attack unguarded spots. This form was best used against a single target and wasn't optimal versus blaster fire. Two famous practitioners of Ataru were Jedi Masters Qui-Gon Jinn and Yoda. Each had a different way of interpreting Ataru, however. Yoda went with the traditional method of applying many acrobatics to the form, while Qui-Gon Jinn focused on maintaining a high momentum while remaining grounded rather than using force-empowered acrobatics. Form 5 comes in 2 variants, Xian and Gemso. Xian was designed to combat blaster bolts by not only deflecting them, but reflecting them back to the shooter, whereas Gemso is made for lightsaber combat. We'll start off with Xian. The general philosophy of Xian is reflection and redirection. You defend yourself and change the flow of powerful blows and attack the newly made openings. Gemso, on the other hand, was made purely for lightsaber combat using Xian as a base. It focused on remaining grounded with a solid defensive stance. Instead of defending yourself while waiting for openings, you instead force those openings open yourself. Due to this, Jedi who were more physically powerful would favor this form. A good example of both forms in action is the Star Wars Rebels Season 2 finale, where Ahsoka Tano is using Xian against Darth Vader's Gemso. Ahsoka is less focused on blocking Vader's attacks and more redirecting his blade elsewhere. Meanwhile, Darth Vader is constantly moving forward, pushing the offense while maintaining a solid defense. Niman is a culmination of all the previous lightsaber forms with a philosophy of everything in moderation. Nimon had no significant weaknesses or advantages, and it also required fairly lax training sessions due to this form being heavily improvised. Due to this, Nimon was often the form used for handling 2 or more lightsaber blades, such as dual-wielding sabers, or wielding a saberstaff, or sometimes both. Along with improvisation, Nimon practitioners would often work in force abilities into their lightsaber combat with Nimon. Such force abilities were relatively harmless in nature due to the Jedi relying on using the force for defense rather than attack. But this did not mean they didn't use it for offensive purposes when needed though. One Nimon maneuver is Draw Closer, where a Jedi will force pull a target directly into the lightsaber. The effectiveness of Form 6 is dependent on the user's knowledge of all previous forms and their ability to adapt to the situation. It is in my opinion one of the more underappreciated forms and could use more love in the series. Who knows? It appears that Cal from the upcoming Fallen Order game is using Nimon. Maybe it's Nimon's time to shine? Only time will tell. Form 7, Juyo, was similar to Form 6 in that it utilized aspects of all previous forms. However, it drops all the defensive aspects of those forms and chooses to keep all the offensive portions of them. In order to truly use Juyo, a Jedi must immerse themselves into the battle and use the thrill of the battle to fuel their movements. Due to the philosophy of Juyo being counterintuitive to the peaceful Jedi philosophy, knowledge of Juyo was restricted within the Jedi Order, with only highly disciplined masters being able to learn this form. Jedi Masters Mace Windu and Sora Bulk worked together to create a new lightsaber form in which they could safely channel their aggression. This resulted in the Form 7 variant, Vapod. Vapod was exceptionally fast when compared to Juyo. Those with untrained eyes would only see a ball of light encompassing the Vapod practitioner. Not only does Vapod release the user's own aggression into the battle, it also sends back dark side fueled abilities to the caster. Mace Windu did this with Palpatine during their battle, causing the lightning to reflect that Palpatine and causing a feedback loop that progressively got stronger. Now that you're familiar with the 7 lightsaber forms, let's talk about the Temple Guard weapons and which forms they would be compatible with. A plus or a minus sign indicates if the weapon would greatly favor the form or barely gets away with it respectively. Let's start with the most iconic weapon, the Jedi Temple Guard Pike. I see this weapon being compatible with forms 1, 3, 5, 6, and possibly 7. Since the Jedi Temple Guard Pike is less of a pike and more of a saberstaff variant, it will follow the same rules as a saberstaff. With both sides activated, it will attack using circular motions, but as we saw with the Temple Guard's ability to parry and reflect attacks with their pike seen in the Nexus of Power book, we can also say that they heavily utilize the defensive Soresu form. Proficiency with Soresu form would be imperative for a Temple Guard, so they would be able to defend themselves and others, fulfilling their role as security. But by nature, the Saberstaff is an offensive weapon meant to quickly attack an opponent. This is where Legends content comes into play. There was a Sith Lord named Darth Zana, the pupil of Darth Bane who founded the Sith Rule of 2. Due to her petite physique, she chose a form where she could defend herself with minimal effort to then strike when her opponents were tired out. This form was none other than Form 3, Soresu. The lightsaber Darth Zana constructed was a double-bladed lightsaber. A unique trait of the Saberstaff was that it had shorter blades than usual. These shorter blades sacrificed reach and leverage in favor of speed and maneuverability. With that in mind, this would show why the blades of the Temple Guard Pike can vary in length. With shorter blades, they can worry less about cutting through the ground or walls around them. Doing so would only slow down their momentum. Thus, shorter blades would have helped them keep up a high rate of defense using Soresu. Since Saberstaffs in general use circular attacks, the Temple Guard Pike would benefit greatly from Form 1, Si Cho. If they wanted to use Form 5, they could defend with their dominant blade only to quickly counterattack with the other, keeping with Form 5's philosophy of reflection, redirection, and counterattacks. Form 6 can be applied to the Pike as well, since they can improvise their moveset and use their force abilities such as Force Bind while in the midst of combat. While Form 7 can be used with the Pike, it's doubtful that the Temple Guards would use Juyo form as they are to act as defenders first. But what if the Temple Guard chose to only have one blade activated? As seen here, the single activated blade appears to be about equal length to the hilt. This would change the combat style entirely. The best weapon to compare this to is the Japanese Nagamaki, a sword used against cavalry that has a hilt length that's about equal to the blade length. Watch how the man is using the Nagamaki to slash his opponents with circular motions. Sound familiar? If you thought Si Cho, then congratulations, you've been paying attention. With the single blade on the long setting, this is how I imagine Jedi Temple Guards would fight with the Temple Guard Pike. You might notice how the man wielding the Nagamaki pushes away the bokken with his hilt. The Temple Guard Pike could definitely pull off this maneuver, assuming the pike is made of the lightsaber resistant Frick alloy as we presumed previously. A longer hilt would also mean that they gain better leverage against their opponents, allowing them to push their blades out of the way. This could possibly work with the Form 5 variant, Gem So. I do not see this weapon working well with Form 2, Makashi, or Form 4, Ataru. Makashi requires precision and thrusting attacks, but the way the Temple Guard Pike is designed, it favors slashing motions over piercing ones. As for Form 4, it could work, but not as well as other forms. You must be able to perform acrobatics and the high momentum with Ataru, but due to the length of this weapon's hilt, it might just get in the way of those maneuvers. Next, we'll discuss the Foldable Saberstaff. This is compatible with Forms 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Before I get to why the Foldable Saberstaff would work well with these forms, I want to establish how Saberstaffs fight, as there are many misconceptions about them. There is a glaring flaw with Saberstaffs in general, the hilt. Due to the back and forth circular motions of Saberstaffs, the hilt tends to remain in the core of the user. Unfortunately, this is a very easy target for someone wielding a standard lightsaber, which often focuses attacks to the core of a target. This is a weakness Obi-Wan Kenobi took advantage of when fighting Darth Maul, and Darth Vader knew the same weakness when he fought the Grand Inquisitor. In both instances, the Saberstaff was damaged or destroyed. Despite the overall weapon being long, it actually has less reach than a standard lightsaber. This is because if both blades are activated, you have to move the blades around your body to swing, while this is not an issue with a single-bladed lightsaber. A standard lightsaber has more reach than a Saberstaff in practice due to the lack of this limitation. The most common mistake people make is that they see a Saberstaff, they think that it must fight like a staff. This is not true. It's more akin to a cicada wing blade. With a staff, you can change your hand position to change your leverage, but with a Saberstaff, you can only grip the hilt, which has a length of 2 feet. It's not a lot of space to apply more leverage, as it favors more circular motions when both blades are on. Now if you had a Saberstaff with a really long hilt with 2 Shoto blades on each end, that would be a totally different and totally awesome story. Though this has only been seen being used by Leia Organa in the Masters of Teräs Käsi video game. This would provide ample leverage for pulling off staff maneuvers while getting the swiftness of a Saberstaff. That aside, let's get back to the task at hand. I just felt it was important to establish the previous information as few people cover it. The Saberstaff would do well with Form 1, as the blades on both sides would work exceptionally well with Form 1's circular movements. The Saberstaff's long hilt would make it uncomfortable to apply the thrusting maneuvers of Form 2 due to a different center of balance than a single-bladed lightsaber. As mentioned earlier, Form 3 can work with a Saberstaff, but it's not ideal. Many Saberstaffs are not lightsaber resistant and can be easily destroyed. However, as seen in Star Wars Rebels, the Saberstaff can work very well with Soresu, assuming they turn off one blade, using it in single blade mode. Though it just shows how much better it is to use a single bladed lightsaber for Form 3 Soresu than a Saberstaff. It is unknown if the Temple Guard Foldable Saberstaff is made of lightsaber resistant materials like we proposed with the Pike. Unlike the Pike, however, the Saberstaff might be better able to work with Form 4 as there is less hilt in the way of pulling off acrobatics. With Form 5 and Saberstaffs, the user would be better off with the Xian variant as they have less leverage than the Pike. They could redirect the opponent's blade to quickly follow up with an attack from their secondary blade. A Saberstaff could work with Form 6 for the same reasons listed with the Pike. Form 7 could be used with a Saberstaff to great effect as proven with Darth Maul, who uses Form 7 with his Saberstaff. But due to the stigma and restricted access to Form 7, it is unlikely Temple Guards would use this form. Now the question is, why would a Temple Guard choose to use the Saberstaff over the Temple Guard Pike and other variants? I believe this comes down to a mixture of more versatility than the Pike, but more offense than the lightsaber or Guard Shotos. The Grand Inquisitor first featured in Star Wars Rebels was a Jedi Temple Guard before the rise of the Empire. When the Grand Inquisitor appeared in Kanan's Force Vision as the Sentinel, you'll see how he's very fast and aggressive with his Saberstaff. Not only this, but he also turns off the secondary blade when it is not needed. This right here is extremely intelligent use of the Saberstaff. This allows him to have more precision and control when one blade is activated, but he can surprise his opponent by suddenly drawing out the secondary blade. Now let's look at the Temple Guard Lightsaber. This lightsaber makes up for the weaknesses the other variants possess. It would go well with any of the 7 forms, but I believe it would work exceptionally well with Forms 2, 3, 5, and 6 when compared to the other Temple Guard lightsabers. The average blade length of a lightsaber is between 36 and 40 inches. This gives you more blade length to deflect blaster bolts, which can provide better results with the defensive nature of Soresu or the redirective nature of Xian. As for Niimon, a common stance for Niimon practitioners using a single-bladed lightsaber is to have the lightsaber to the side with their open hand out front. This allows them to mix force abilities with the lightsaber combat. Since the standard lightsaber is light and the least cumbersome of the variants we've gone over, this will allow a Newman practitioner to more easily focus on working in force abilities into their combat. The standard lightsaber would also be optimal for Form 2, Makashi, which a Temple Guard can use to great effect if a rogue Jedi is loose in the temple. Last, we have the Temple Guard Guard Shotos. I believe the Guard Shotos would work with Forms 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6, though the forms it would really shine with are Forms 3 and 5. The Guard Shoto is a rare lightsaber variant that has only been seen wielded by 2 people, Maris Brood from the Force Unleashed video game, and Sinya from the second issue of the Darth Maul comic from the year 2000. The weapon the Guard Shoto was based off of was the Tonfa, a defensive weapon that uses centrifugal force for attacks. By its very nature, the Guard Shoto is defensive due to its hilt being made of lightsaber resistant materials. Let's go over what the Force and Destiny Sourcebook, Keeping the Peace, has to say about it. Let's compare it to the Temple Guard Pike due to both of them being defensive weapons. The Guard Shoto deals 1 less damage, it has a rank of 1 with a defensive property, and instead of a stun setting, it has a deflection property with a rank of 2. So what does this tell us? According to these numbers, the weapon is better for self-defense than the Pike as it sacrifices damage output and a stun setting in favor for 2 ranks with the deflection property. The deflection property on a weapon indicates that the weapon adds +1 to the character's range defense. This makes it harder for ranged weapons to land a hit on them, and since this has a deflection rank of 2, it adds 2 to the wielder's range defense, providing a solid range defense. Since the Temple Guard robes add 2 ranks to melee and range defense, a Guard Shoto would add an additional 1 melee defense and 2 range defense. And since these are always paired, the Temple Guard would gain 2 melee defense and 4 range defense. But due to the rules of the RPG, a character cannot receive more than 4 in melee or range defense, so a Temple Guard wielding 2 Guard Shotos would be exceptionally hard to hit with either a lightsaber or a blaster, as their melee and range defenses are maxed out. It can be a bit weird using tabletop RPG information as a means of interpreting things from a lore perspective, but unless more information about Temple Guard combat is released, this is our best option. Instead, let's look at how Guard Shotos would have more likely been used by looking towards their real-life counterparts, the Tonfas. The Tonfa was developed as a self-defense weapon in Japan for farmers. The Tonfas acted as extensions of the wielder's arms. They could block incoming blows with the Tonfas on their arms, only to spin them forward and jab or swipe at their opponent. With proper technique, they can wrap up the arms of another armed opponent to disarm them or bash them with their free hand. Though the Guard Shoto is different as it possesses a lightsaber at the end. The blade is short in length and it will make it harder to hit a target unless you're really close to the target. This could be why the Guard Shoto deals less damage than a standard lightsaber. Because this is designed as a blocking weapon, it's reasonable to assume that the hilt is made of lightsaber resistant materials, explaining how it has the defensive property of 1. The deflection property of this weapon makes no sense to me. The Tonfa is designed for close combat encounters and would greatly benefit from melee confrontations, but it has significantly shorter blades and more wind-up time than a standard lightsaber. With a standard lightsaber, you have more blade length to cover more areas of your body in a short amount of time. Perhaps the designers of the game assumed they would rapidly spin the Tonfas to deflect blaster bolts? Personally, I think that's inefficient, but take it as you will. I see users of Guard Shotos relying on Forms 3 and 5. With Form 3, they would have an incredible defense against lightsabers since they can block incoming blows with their hilts. To keep in line with the pacifist nature of Form 3, they could grapple, then disarm their opponent and take them in peacefully. Or, if they require more offense, they will block, redirect through grappling, and attack with their offhand weapon. This is more in line with the Form 5 variant, Siow, where you're forcing openings on a melee opponent yourself. Since the Tonfa uses spins with centrifugal force to bludgeon targets, it uses a lot of circular motions. With the addition of a lightsaber blade, these circular motions would allow it to utilize Form 1, though such blows would not have as much force as one would gain by wielding a standard lightsaber with 2 hands, but it would make for a very fast weapon. Because the Tonfas are kept close to the body and rely on fast attacks, they would be a good fit for Form 4. Because there are a lot of acrobatics involved with Form 4, the Guard Shotos would often move along with the user's body, reducing the risk of self-impalement. Due to the improvisational nature of Form 6, Guard Shotos could work well with it, though it would have more of a reliance on melee improvisation and less on implementing force-based abilities into their combat. This is due to both hands gripping a lightsaber. With a standard lightsaber, you could release one hand to utilize a force push or force pull, but letting go of one hand means you'll drop a Guard Shoto. While you can use force abilities such as force push while dual-wielding lightsabers, you're doing so in a weakened state. A Jedi with free hands can better harness the force than they would if their hands were full. This would mean someone dual-wielding Guard Shotos would use more defensive force powers such as Force Camouflage or Force Protection, or use Saber Throw and Force-Powered Acrobatics for something more offensive. That about does it. Now let's look at the pros and cons of each of these weapons and talk about why a Temple Guard would favor one weapon over another. So let's start with the Temple Guard Pike. Why is this a standard weapon for the Temple Guards? It wields two blades, therefore it can strike swiftly at a target whether it's in its regular or stun setting, allowing the Temple Guard to quickly dispatch a target. Due to its defensive rank, most likely due to it being made of frick alloy, it's very good for fighting other lightsabers. And while it's long and cumbersome, it only ever saw use while the Temple Guard was on duty, so it wouldn't be a hindrance in the applications where it's used. I believe this is the standard weapon used by the Jedi Temple Guards due to its ability to swiftly and sometimes harmlessly dispatch other lightsaber wielders, which the Jedi Temple is full of. It fulfills the necessary requirements to maintain peace within the Jedi Temple. As for the Jedi Temple Guard Saberstaff, it too is able to deal damage swiftly. A Temple Guard could also utilize it as a single-bladed lightsaber when necessary for precise defensive maneuvers while maintaining the capability for a strong offense. Though this weapon requires the element of surprise to utilize to its full potential. If a battle goes on for too long, a smart opponent would realize the weakness of the weapon and aim for the hilt to destroy it. The Jedi Temple Guard Lightsaber is an extremely balanced and versatile weapon that lacks any significant weaknesses. I can see this being used by a Jedi Temple Guard who favors a single-bladed lightsaber, as the majority of Jedi trained exclusively with a single-bladed lightsaber. This is also the only lightsaber in this list that could successfully pull out the dueling form, Makashi, which would help in lightsaber duels while on duty. Or it could allow them to implement more force abilities to control someone and slow them down with Niimon. And last we have the Jedi Temple Guard Guard Shotos. These would provide the best self-defense for the Temple Guard and allow them to disarm melee opponents. However, becoming proficient with these would require extensive training. It reduces the Temple Guard's abilities to use force powers, and it has a very short reach and is not as good for defending others as the other lightsabers. If an ally was under fire, it would be better to use a longer lightsaber to block the blaster bolt with. With a Guard Shoto, they would have to extend their arms or their entire body further out to defend an ally, leaving themselves more vulnerable to attacks. Each of these weapons have their advantages and disadvantages, but that should just about do it for this chapter. In the next chapter, we'll be discussing the tactics and the battle strategies used by the Jedi Temple Guards and how they would have fought opponents. Goodbye, and may the Force be with you.